I was about to reveal my $1 billion jewelry collection to my husband. Then one text message shattered everything I thought was real. I was about to reveal my $1 billion jewelry collection to my husband. Then one message shattered everything I thought was real. My name is Trina Rondo, and my father used to say I was born under a chandelier. Bathed in light but raised in shadow. He meant it lovingly. To him, light was legacy, and shadow was protection. Growing up as the daughter of Ambassador Chris Rondo, the man behind Rondo Jewels, meant that I lived in a world that shimmered. Every birthday gift came wrapped in silk. Every dinner table glowed with gold cutlery and quiet power. But despite all the glitter, my father believed in silence more than spectacle. "You don't have to shine for the world to know your light," he told me once, as we walked through the private vault beneath our estate. Real brilliance speaks softly. That night still plays in my mind. The dim amber lights, the scent of cedar and velvet, the jewels resting in glass cases like sleeping constellations. Each piece had a story. My grandmother's engagement sapphire, the crown brooch once worn by a queen, my mother's diamond choker that made the press gasp. Those were our heirlooms, the Rondo legacy. And for years, I guarded them like my father taught me, quietly, discreetly, hidden from those who might mistake love for leverage, including my husband, Brooke White. Brooke was never meant to belong in my world. He came from charm, not pedigree, a man with quick wit and a salesman's grin who wore confidence like cologne. We met at a charity gala, the kind where conversations were coated in politeness and champagne. I remember standing by the balcony that night, bored, when I heard him laugh behind me, loud, unfiltered, alive. "Beautiful view," he'd said, glancing at the city skyline before smirking. "But I'm guessing you didn't come for that." I turned to look at him, surprised by the ease in his voice. Most men who approached me at those events led with flattery or business cards. Brooke led with presence. He wasn't intimidated by my last name. In fact, he didn't even recognize it. That was new and dangerous. By the end of that night, I had laughed more than I had in months. He made me feel visible, not valuable. That was all it took. We married 2 years later in a quiet garden ceremony. No media, no headlines, just us. Or at least, that's what I thought it was. For 5 years, I kept the Rondo vault a secret. I let Brooke believe I was comfortably well off, managing my late father's estate modestly. I wanted to see how love moved when it wasn't weighed down by money. But lately, something had changed. Brooke had changed. The laughter that once filled our home had become sharp. His compliments came with edges. His eyes, once warm and full of wonder, had grown restless. Still, tonight was supposed to fix that. Tonight was supposed to be the night I finally showed him who I really was, and what I'd been protecting all along. The dining room smelled of roses and sandalwood, just like my mother used to keep it. The table was laid with white linen and crystal goblets, but it wasn't the dinner that mattered. It was what sat at the center of the table. 7 velvet boxes, each containing a fragment of our empire, the Rondo sapphire, the Verona diamond, the Aurora choker, the last design my father had touched before his passing. All of them gleamed under the chandelier's glow, delicate as promises. I poured myself a glass of red wine, my reflection swimming in its surface. My pulse was steady, or maybe I was just convincing myself it was. From down the hall, I heard Brooke's voice. He was on the phone, laughing. That laugh again, careless, golden, but this time, hollow. I picked up my phone to text him to come to dinner, and that's when it happened. The screen lit up. A message from him. "Brooke, she's nothing like Trina. She actually makes me feel alive." I froze. For a moment, I thought I'd misread it, that maybe it wasn't meant for me. But before I could even blink, another text appeared. "Brooke, dinner with her tomorrow night. Can't keep lying forever." The wine glass trembled in my hand. A drop spilled onto the tablecloth, bleeding into white linen like a wound. Behind me, his laughter carried through the corridor. Careless, intimate. My breath caught. My throat felt tight. My ears rang. I looked at the velvet boxes lined up like witnesses and felt sick. The sapphires that once symbolized love now mocked me. The diamonds I'd polished with memory now looked like traps. I opened the messages again. This time, I scrolled. There were photos, words, confessions that carved their way through my chest. You're the one I should have married. She's just comfortable, not exciting. Once I get what I need, I'm out. My hand shook as I set down the phone. The air smelled like betrayal now, sweet and metallic. I should have screamed, should have thrown something, but instead, I did what my father taught me. I went quiet. I stared at the jewelry, at the billion-dollar secret I was about to hand to a man who had already sold me for novelty. And something inside me hardened. Brooke walked in a few minutes later, still on the phone. He smiled that easy smile. "Babe, you look beautiful," he said, pecking my cheek before grabbing his drink. I forced a smile. "You're late," I whispered. He shrugged. "Traffic. You know how it is." I didn't answer. He didn't notice the tremor in my hand or the way I was gripping my wine glass like a lifeline. He talked about his day, the gym, his new business contacts, how crazy loyal some people were when you treated them right. The irony nearly made me laugh. I nodded, playing along. Inside, something dark and steady took root. When he finally excused himself to take one last call, I glanced at his glass, the faint imprint of his smile on the rim, and whispered under my breath, "You'll never see me coming." That night, long after Brooke had gone to bed, I gathered the velvet boxes one by one and carried them to my study. Each piece glimmered in the low light, silent, loyal, and eternal. I placed my father's portrait beside them. "Papa," I whispered, my voice barely audible, "you were right. It's not the jewels people want. It's the control." I turned off the lights, leaving the jewels glowing faintly in the dark like stars. And as I stood there, staring into that quiet, sacred shimmer, I made a silent vow. I would no longer protect the wrong people. I would no longer hide my worth. And when I finally revealed who I was, it wouldn't be to impress. It would be to end. The morning after the betrayal didn't come gently. The world outside was drenched in gold, the kind of sunrise that usually made Trina pause and whisper gratitude. But today, the light felt like mockery. Too loud, too bright. The house smelled of wine and wilted roses, remnants of the dinner that never happened. Brooke's laughter still echoed faintly in the halls, recorded ghosts from the night before. He was gone when she woke, an early gym session probably, or maybe breakfast with her. Trina sat at the edge of their bed, motionless, her silk robe loose around her shoulders. The bedsheet beside her was cool. She stared at the faint impression his head had left on the pillow, and felt nothing. Not anger, not grief, just an eerie, hollow stillness. Her phone vibrated, a calendar reminder flashing on the screen. Legacy Collection Inspection, 10:02 a.m., Rondo Estates. Right, her father's vault. The day she'd planned to celebrate with Brooke now felt like a summons from another life. But she went anyway, not because she wanted to, but because she needed to. The Rondo estate was the only place that had ever made sense when the rest of the world fell apart. The drive from their city penthouse to Rondo Estates took 2 hours. The road curved through silent countryside, lined with oak trees that had stood longer than her father's company. The closer she got, the heavier the air felt. When the wrought iron gates came into view, the ones engraved with Rondo Jewel Legacy 1923, she felt her throat tighten. The guards recognized her immediately and swung the gates open. Their eyes softened, respectful. They always had that look with her, the look that said, "You belong to something greater than pain." The mansion loomed ahead, all stone and history. It wasn't a home anymore, not since her father's death, but it was sacred ground. The smell hit her as soon as she stepped in, lavender polish, old wood, and faint hints of diamond dust from the workshop downstairs. Inside, she was greeted by Anne, the chief artisan, a woman in her 60s with hands that could tame gold like it was silk. "Miss Trina," Anne smiled warmly, wiping her hands on her apron. "We weren't expecting you till later." "I couldn't sleep," Trina said softly. "Figured I'd come early." From the far end of the room, Munoz, the head gem cutter, looked up from his workbench. His silver hair gleamed under the light. "You have that look, Nina," he said in his melodic accent. "The same one your father had when something was wrong." She almost smiled. Almost. "Let's just say I'm learning how right he was about people," she murmured. Anne frowned, but before she could ask, Hardy, the youngest of the trio, appeared from the back room, a tall man with gentle eyes and a craftsman's patience. "We were just finishing the Aurora pieces," he said. "Would you like to see them?" Trina nodded. "Yes, please." They led her through the marble hall into the vault room, a circular chamber her father had designed himself. The walls were lined with black velvet, and glass cases glimmered in the dim light like constellations trapped on Earth. At the center, under a soft spotlight, lay the Legacy collection, 10 necklaces, 3 tiaras, and a set of diamond cuffs so intricate they looked like spun frost. Each piece was a story, each stone a memory. Her father's portrait hung at the far wall, his gaze steady, almost alive. Beneath it, his inscription read, "Trust only those who respect your silence." She stared at it for a long time. The words had always been a family mantra, but today they felt like prophecy. Brooke never respected her silence. He'd filled it with his own noise, jokes, arrogance, small lies that grew into walls. She'd mistaken charm for character. That was her first mistake. The second was believing silence was safety. Now, standing under her father's gaze, surrounded by the empire he built, she understood something vital. Silence could protect, yes, but it could also imprison. Trina turned to Anne. "I need to speak with Hardy, privately." Anne hesitated, glancing at Munoz, but then nodded and left the room. When they were alone, Trina walked to the central display and traced her fingers along the glass. "Hardy," she said quietly, "how much of this collection is still under the Rondo Trust?" "All of it," he replied. "It's protected under the family estate, as your father instructed. You're the sole trustee now." "And if I wanted to move everything to a new vault, one off the books, could that be done quietly?" Hardy blinked. "It could. But Miss Trina, that's not something we've ever done without board approval." "There is no board anymore," she said, meeting his eyes. "There's just me." He studied her for a moment, sensing the shift in her tone. "Does this have to do with Mr. White?" Her silence was answer enough. Hardy nodded slowly. "Understood. I'll handle it." "Good," she said. "No one else can know. Not Munoz, not Anne, not anyone." He hesitated again. "Where should we move it?" Trina turned toward her father's portrait. "Somewhere safe, somewhere only the Rondos would think to look." He gave a respectful nod. "I'll make it happen." When Hardy left, Trina sat in the center of the vault, surrounded by the quiet hum of refrigerated air. The diamonds around her shimmered like frozen fire. She leaned back, closed her eyes, and tried to breathe, but the weight in her chest wouldn't lift. Images flashed behind her eyelids. Brooke's grin, the text message, the word alive. He said she didn't make him feel alive. She almost laughed at the irony. Everything he touched, every car, every trip, every suit, was paid for by the woman he called lifeless. She opened her eyes and whispered, "You'll see life, Brooke, just not the kind you imagined." Pulling out her phone, she dialed her lawyer, Mr. Alton. "Trina," he greeted. "I was just reviewing your late father's estate documents. How are you?" "Efficient," she said. "And I need you to make a few changes." "What kind of changes?" "I want a new trusteeship drawn up, under a different name. The Rondo assets, the collection, the patents, the estates, everything. Transfer full control." Mr. Alton paused. "That's significant. Should I ask why?" "You shouldn't," she said simply. You should just trust my silence." There was a quiet beat of understanding on the line. Then, "As you wish, Ms. Rondo. I'll begin immediately." When the call ended, she exhaled slowly. Her pulse had steadied. Her hands didn't shake anymore. Later that afternoon, she walked through the workshop where Anne and Munoz were polishing the new line. Sunlight danced across the jewels, scattering fragments of color over the floor. Anne looked up. "Are you feeling better, dear?" Trina smiled faintly. "Better than I was yesterday." Munoz chuckled softly. "Your father used to say, 'Rondo women don't cry over men. We sell diamonds to their mistresses instead.'" Trina laughed under her breath, the first real sound of life that had escaped her lips since the night before. He was right about that. As she turned to leave, Anne called out, "We're still setting up for tomorrow's presentation. Should we expect Mr. White?" Trina paused at the doorway. The sunlight caught her hair, making it glow like fire. "No," she said evenly. "Not this time." By dusk, she stood outside the vault one last time. Hardy approached with a clipboard. "It's done," he said. "Every asset, every record. The new location is secure. No digital trail." "Perfect." He hesitated. "Should I tell the guards to restrict Mr. White's access to the estate?" Trina's lips curved, not into a smile, but something colder. "No need. He won't even think to come here, not until it's too late." She looked once more at her father's portrait. "Diamonds don't cry, Papa," she whispered. "But they remember." Then she turned, her heels echoing across the marble as the vault door sealed shut behind her, the sound final, like the closing of a chapter. By the next morning, Trina had learned the art of pretending. Pretending she slept well. Pretending she didn't notice Brooke's cologne lingering on the guest bathroom towel instead of the one in their shared room. Pretending she couldn't smell the faint trace of unfamiliar perfume when he brushed past her on his way to make coffee. Pretending she was still his wife, not his cover story. Brooke stood at the kitchen island, hair still damp from his shower, scrolling his phone with that self-satisfied grin she used to find charming. "Morning," he said, not looking up. "You're up early. What happened? Couldn't sleep without your spreadsheets?" Trina forced a smile. "Something like that." He laughed softly. "You and those old family files. You know, sometimes I think you care more about that jewelry collection than you do about us." The irony was so sharp it nearly drew blood. She stirred her coffee slowly, watching the liquid swirl like dark silk. "Maybe that's because the jewelry never lies to me." He looked up, frowning slightly, unsure whether to take it as a joke. She didn't clarify. The silence between them had changed. It wasn't the comfortable kind anymore. It was a silence that listened. Brooke filled it with meaningless chatter. Business deals, gym gossip, the new friend who might invest in his company. He mentioned her name once, lightly, as if it meant nothing. "You remember Eva, that marketing consultant I told you about?" Trina blinked. "Eva Marlowe?" He nodded, grinning. "Yeah, she's really been helping me out. Sharp girl, kind of reminds me of you. If you weren't so serious all the time." She took a slow sip of her coffee, her heartbeat steady. "Maybe you just like people who remind you of me before you made me this serious." Brooke's smile faltered, but he recovered quickly. "You're overthinking again, babe. You've been tense lately. You need a hobby or something." He kissed her forehead like she was a child, then walked out, leaving behind the faint sound of his car alarm and the sharp echo of his arrogance. That afternoon, Trina sat in her office overlooking the city skyline. On her desk lay a file stamped, "Confidential, Rondo Holdings Transfer." The ink was barely dry. Everything her father had built now belonged to her and her alone. But instead of pride, she felt a strange ache, a mourning for the woman she used to be before she learned what betrayal felt like from someone she trusted most. When her assistant knocked, she didn't look up. "Come in." A quiet voice answered. "Mrs. White, Mr. Hardy is here. He says it's urgent." Trina nodded, gesturing for him to enter. Hardy stepped in, holding a small black envelope. "It's done," he said. "The vault transfer is complete. But there's something else. You might want to see this." He handed her the envelope. Inside were printed photographs. Brooke and Eva sitting in a cafe, his hand on hers, his face too close. Another photo of them entering a hotel together. Hardy's expression was unreadable. "I didn't mean to pry. I had someone check for external access requests to the vault system. His name came up twice." Trina looked at the photos again. "He tried to access the estate?" Hardy nodded. "Yesterday. And again this morning." She let out a slow exhale, her voice calm but cold. "Thank you, Hardy. You did the right thing." When he left, she stayed seated. The photos spread across her desk like evidence from someone else's life. The woman she'd been a week ago might have sobbed. But this version of her, the one shaped by silence and betrayal, simply reached for her pen and began to write. Her letter was short. "Brooke, I know everything, and I'm not angry, not the way you think. You wanted a woman who makes you feel alive? Then watch what happens when I stop pretending to be dead." She folded the note neatly and tucked it into his nightstand drawer. That night, she hosted dinner for him. Candles flickered low. The table glowed under soft amber light, the same setup she'd planned for her big reveal days ago. Only this time, the velvet jewelry boxes were gone. Brooke arrived late, smelling of whiskey and something floral. "Wow," he said, loosening his tie. "Didn't know we were going fancy tonight. What's the occasion?" Trina smiled faintly. "Just wanted to celebrate life." He raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" "You've been acting weird lately." She poured him wine. "Maybe I'm just tired of acting." He laughed uneasily, trying to break the tension. "You always did love your drama." Trina's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, darling, you haven't seen drama yet." As they ate, Brooke talked about his new investor, how things were finally looking up. Trina let him talk, nodding in all the right places. Inside, she was memorizing his every word, his tone, his arrogance, the same way she memorized gemstones before setting them into place. Every lie had a facet, every betrayal a shine. When he stepped away to take a call, she noticed his phone vibrating on the counter. The screen lit up. Eva Marlowe. Her finger hovered over it, but she didn't pick it up. She didn't need to. Her silence had already become her sharpest weapon. She whispered to herself, "You can't shame a woman who's already seen the truth." Then she turned to the camera, her voice dropping low, almost like she was speaking to someone watching from the other side of the screen. "If you've ever trusted the wrong person, if you've ever loved someone who looked you in the eyes and lied to you anyway, don't just scroll past. Hit subscribe. Because I promise you, what comes next isn't heartbreak. It's a reckoning. And if you wouldn't stay silent after that kind of betrayal, tell me in the comments what you'd do." When Brooke returned, she was clearing the plates. "You're quiet," he said. "Just thinking," she replied. "About what?" She met his eyes, her expression unreadable. "About how strangers can become the people we trust most, and sometimes the people we trust most turn into strangers." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing you'll understand tonight." He looked confused, but didn't press further. He had never been curious about her silences, only threatened by them. When he went upstairs, Trina lingered by the window. The city lights blinked below like 1,000 secrets waiting to be uncovered. She felt calm, almost eerily so. Tomorrow, she would begin dismantling everything. His comfort, his confidence, his illusion of control. Piece by piece, like prying diamonds from their setting. She whispered, "I'll give you what you wanted, Brooke, a woman who makes you feel alive." Then she blew out the last candle, leaving only darkness and the faint scent of roses behind. The irony was almost poetic at Shetton. Brooke had spent years insisting Trina tone it down, that she didn't need to look rich to command respect. Yet now, as he strutted around their home preparing for his so-called big night, his instructions couldn't have been clearer. "Dress like money for once," he'd said, straightening his cufflinks in the mirror. This dinner's important. Investors, potential partners, people who matter. People who mattered. The words hung in the air like smoke, bitter and heavy. Trina smiled faintly, her reflection unreadable. "Of course, darling," she murmured. "I'll look unforgettable." If only he knew how literal that promise was. By early evening, the house buzzed with movement. Caterers rushed through the hallway, floral arrangements filled the dining space, and Brooke floated about like a self-anointed prince awaiting coronation. Trina watched him from the staircase, his tailored suit, his charming grin, his hollow confidence. The same man who once said jewelry was just glitter for bored women now bragged to his guests about high-end aesthetic sensibilities. She had to bite the inside of her cheek to keep from laughing. On the dining table sat 20 crystal glasses, each shimmering under golden light, but none shone brighter than the thought pulsing in her chest. Tonight he sets the stage. Tomorrow, I take it from him. Hours before the guests arrived, Trina made one private call to Munoz, her father's most trusted craftsman at Rondo Estates. "Has it arrived?" she asked quietly. "Yes, ma'am," Munoz replied. "Delivered exactly as you instructed. The case is sealed and labeled under the foundation name. No one will suspect a thing." "Perfect," Trina said. "Tomorrow, we open it." She ended the call and exhaled slowly. Inside that sealed black velvet case was the Aurora diamond, the rarest creation of the Rondo line, a necklace her father once described as a constellation captured in glass. For years, Trina had locked it away, saving it for a moment that meant something. Now, it would serve a different purpose. Not love, not legacy, but revelation. By 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. One by one, guests filed in. Sleek dresses, tailored tuxedos, laughter that dripped with ambition. Brooke played host like a man born for the spotlight. His voice carried across the room, full of ease and ego. "Trina, sweetheart," he called, gesturing her over. "Come meet everyone." She descended the staircase slowly, every step deliberate. Her gown, champagne silk with a jeweled neckline, caught the light just enough to whisper of money, but not boast it. A perfect illusion. Gasps floated through the air. Compliments followed. "You look stunning, Mrs. White." "Exquisite taste." "Where did you get that dress?" Brooke smiled proudly, resting a possessive hand at her back. "See? I told you she cleans up nice." It was supposed to sound like affection, but to Trina, it was just another bruise he didn't realize he'd left. Then she saw her. Eva Marlowe. She recognized the woman instantly. Tall, poised, confident in that performative way only people who crave validation are. Eva wore a crimson dress and a glittering choker that caught the chandelier's light. Imitation Rondo pearls. Of course. Brooke noticed Trina staring. "Oh, right," he said, feigning casualness. "You remember Eva? From the marketing project I told you about? She's a friend." Trina tilted her head. "A friend?" Eva smiled, extending her hand. "It's such an honor to meet you, Mrs. White. I've heard so much about you." Trina shook her hand lightly. "I'm sure you have." The moment lingered just long enough for discomfort to fill the space between them. Brooke jumped in with nervous laughter. "Eva's helping me expand my portfolio. She's got this amazing eye for detail." Trina's lips curved. "So I've heard." Eva's eyes flickered, just for a second, betraying recognition that her secret wasn't as safe as she thought. Dinner began with wine and polite conversation. Brooke talked about his vision, his growth, his network. Every sentence began with "I" and ended with "me." Trina said little. She didn't need to. Watching him boast about achievements built on her silence was entertainment enough. Eva laughed at his jokes. The guests nodded approvingly, and yet, beneath the performance, Trina noticed the smallest things. The way Brooke's hand brushed Eva's chair when he poured her wine, the fleeting glances they exchanged when they thought no one was looking. It was almost impressive. The audacity of pretending so boldly. Almost. Halfway through dinner, as the conversation turned to investments, Brooke leaned close to Trina and whispered, "You're doing great. Just smile more. Makes people like you." She turned her head toward him, her expression calm. "Don't worry, they'll like me soon enough." He grinned, misinterpreting her tone. "That's my girl." But Trina's eyes were elsewhere, on the faint reflection of the black velvet case sitting by the foyer. Her stage was ready. Later, when the guests moved toward the living room for post-dinner drinks, Trina excused herself to check on the caterers. In truth, she slipped into the quiet hallway and opened her phone. One unread message from Munoz blinked at the top of her screen. Munoz, "Everything's ready for tomorrow. The vault's sealed. The press list is finalized." Trina typed slowly, her fingers steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Trina, thank you. Tell Anne and Hardy to be prepared. Tomorrow, the Rondo name returns to light." She hit send and locked her phone. When she turned, she caught her reflection in the mirror. Poised, composed, deadly beautiful. For the first time in weeks, she smiled without pain. Tomorrow, Brooke would meet the woman he thought he'd broken, and she would show him just how indestructible a Rondo truly was. The room glowed in golden warmth, the kind that made even deceit look elegant. Laughter spilled from every corner of the dining space, a symphony of privilege and pretense. Brooke White sat at the head of the table, flashing the same charming grin that once made Trina Rondo believe in love. Now, it just looked like performance. The guests, investors, colleagues, social climbers, circled him like moths around a flame. Their admiration fed him, puffing his ego with every toast and compliment. And beside him sat Eva Marlowe, dressed in a scarlet gown and a string of imitation Rondo pearls, a cruel irony so loud it could have choked Trina. "Those pearls look divine, Eva," a guest gushed. "Thank you," Eva smiled sweetly. "Brooke helped me choose them." Brooke chuckled, his hand resting dangerously close to Eva's arm. "What can I say? I've got an eye for beauty." The table erupted in polite laughter. Trina's lips curved, not in amusement, but in silent acknowledgement of how far gone he was. There he sat, parading his affair under chandeliers she paid for, in a house she owned, at a table that once belonged to her father. Her silence wasn't weakness tonight. It was ammunition. "Trina, darling," Brooke said mid-toast, raising his glass, "you should tell them about your hobby. What was it again? Vintage jewelry or something?" He was mocking her, of course. He always did when he felt threatened, hiding cruelty behind charm. Trina smiled faintly. "Something like that," she said. Her tone was velvet, smooth, dangerous. Ava giggled softly. "Oh, yes. I heard you're into collecting. That's so quaint." Brooke smirked. "She's a sentimental one. Keeps all her trinkets locked away, never wears them." The laughter that followed was light, but Trina caught the glint of cruelty in Brooke's eyes. She stood slowly, her chair scraping softly against the marble floor. "If you'll excuse me for a moment," she said, her voice steady, "there's something I'd like to share." Brooke barely looked up. "Sure, babe. Don't be long." He had no idea what was coming. A few moments later, the soft murmur of conversation was broken by the sound of footsteps returning. When Trina reappeared in the doorway, the chatter faded into silence. In her hands was a black velvet case, elegant, understated, almost regal. She walked to the center of the room, each step measured, her gaze locked on Brooke. She placed the case on the table, flipped open the clasp, and lifted out the Aurora diamond. The air seemed to leave the room. The necklace shimmered beneath the chandelier like captured lightning, a cascade of white fire and blue brilliance, each diamond hand-cut, each gem older than the marriage that was about to collapse. Gasps rippled through the guests. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Brooke blinked, unsure whether to laugh or panic. Finally, he let out a nervous chuckle. Wow, babe, you've been shopping? Trina's eyes met his, calm as ice. No, she said softly. This one can't be bought. The room went still. Forks froze midair. Eva shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Trina stepped closer to the table, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. This necklace once belonged to my late father, she said. Ambassador Chris Rondo, founder of the Rondo jewelry empire. Gasps, murmurs. Recognition flickered in several faces. The name carried weight, old money, generational influence, legacy. Brooke's smirk faltered. Wait, what? Trina didn't break eye contact. Every piece in that empire, every gem, every vault, every hidden collection belongs to me now, including this one, the Aurora Diamond. Someone whispered, "The Rondo Diamond Collection?" Another voice answered in awe, "Worth over $1 billion." Brooke's face drained of color. He looked around the table as if searching for someone to laugh with him, someone to tell him this was just another of Trina's quiet little jokes. But no one moved, not one soul. Trina smiled faintly, her voice soft but sharp enough to cut glass. "You once told me I should dress like money. Remember?" She lifted the necklace, letting it catch the light. "Consider this my response." The silence was deafening, the kind that felt like judgment. Every laugh from earlier died in the air, leaving only the brittle sound of Brooke's breathing. He tried to recover. "Trina, you can't just—" But she cut him off, her gaze colder than the diamonds she wore. "Oh, I can. I just did." The table sat frozen, the perfect audience for the quiet undoing of a man who thought he'd married beneath him. And as Trina clasped the Aurora diamond around her neck, her eyes never left his. "You said I didn't shine enough for you, Brooke. I think I just proved you wrong." The crowd's stunned silence stretches on. Brooke's lips part, but no words come. The laughter from earlier has turned into disbelief, and for the first time, he looks small under the light. Trina glances toward the door. "Dinner's not over," she says coolly. "It's just getting interesting." The silence that followed Trina's revelation was thick enough to choke on. The guests shifted in their seats, glancing at one another in uneasy confusion, torn between disbelief and awe. The Aurora diamond glittered at Trina's throat like a crown of truth, while Brooke White stood pale, blinking rapidly, as if trying to wake from a nightmare. He finally found his voice, sharp, desperate. "You're lying," he snapped. "This is some kind of game, right?" Trina tilted her head slightly, as though studying a curious insect. "A game?" she repeated softly. "No, Brooke, that's what you were playing. I'm just ending it." He laughed, too loud, too forced, and looked around for support from his guests. "Come on, people. You know my wife. She loves her stories. $1 billion vault? Her? She can't even balance a checkbook." A ripple of awkward laughter followed, half-hearted and hollow. Even Eva Marlowe forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Trina's expression didn't change. She only raised a single brow, and then pressed a button on the small remote in her hand. The chandelier dimmed slightly as the hidden projector above the dining table hummed to life. The screen on the far wall flickered. Then Brooke's own voice filled the room. "Once she opens that vault, baby, we're set for life." The blood drained from his face. Gasps rippled through the room. One of his colleagues set down his wine glass with a sharp clink. Someone whispered, "Oh my God!" On the screen, the video continued. Brooke's voice was clearer now, lazy and confident, dripping with arrogance. "She has no clue. I'll get her to merge assets by the end of next quarter. Then when the vault's in my name, we disappear. You and me, no prenup, no problem." "And her?" Ava's voice replied, low and teasing. "She'll have her diamonds to cry on," Brooke said, laughing. "They say old money dies slow. I'll speed it up." The sound of Brooke's laughter echoed through the room like a ghost mocking itself. No one moved. No one breathed. Eva Marlowe sat frozen, her crimson lipstick suddenly too bright against the colorless pallor of her skin. She looked like she wanted to vanish. Brooke staggered toward the table, pointing a trembling hand at Trina. You recorded me?" Trina didn't flinch. "You recorded yourself, darling. I just kept the proof." He turned to the guests. "This is illegal. She's manipulating." But no one was listening to him anymore. Their eyes were fixed on the screen, and on the woman standing in front of it, glowing like vengeance carved in diamonds. Trina lifted her glass, her movements slow, graceful, deliberate. She took a sip of red wine, the light catching the cut crystal, and said quietly, "You called me lifeless, Brooke, but this is what resurrection looks like." The words hit like a slap. Gasps echoed. Someone muttered, "Damn." Another covered her mouth, watching the scene unfold like a car crash she couldn't look away from. Brooke's voice cracked as he shouted, "You think this makes you the victim? You think people will pity you?" Trina smiled faintly. "No, Brooke. They'll respect me. Something you never learned to do." He lunged forward, his hand swiping toward the screen, as though he could erase the evidence with brute force. The projector crashed to the floor, sparks flying briefly before dying in silence. The silence that followed was deafening. Trina didn't even blink. She simply set her wine glass down and straightened her shoulders. "Dinner's over," she said softly. "You can all see yourselves out." No one moved. Brooke's mother, pale and trembling, looked like she wanted to speak but thought better of it. His colleagues avoided his eyes, pretending to check their phones, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal that had just unfolded. Eva stood abruptly, her chair screeching against the marble. "Trina, I didn't know." Trina's eyes met hers, calm and merciless. "You knew enough," she said. "You knew he was married. You just didn't know who he married." Eva opened her mouth, then closed it again. She turned and fled toward the door, heels clicking in frantic rhythm. Brooke followed her with his eyes, then turned back to Trina. "You ruined me," he whispered. Trina finally smiled. The kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes, the kind of smile that had survived fire and come out shining. "No, Brooke," she said softly. "You did that all by yourself." Then she lifted her chin, turned, and walked away. Each step echoed through the marble hall, deliberate, final, powerful. The aurora diamond shimmered at her neck with every movement, reflecting the fractured light of a marriage that had just crumbled in front of its audience. Behind her, Brooke stood frozen, surrounded by guests who no longer looked at him like a man, only as a warning. The front doors of the estate closed with a muted thud as Trina stepped into the night air, her heels striking the stone pathway with elegant finality. For the first time in years, she breathed freely. The chill bit her skin, but it felt like freedom, like the first inhale after drowning. In the distance, she could still hear the muffled chaos inside, the whispers, the embarrassment, the fallout beginning. Trina looked up at the night sky and whispered to herself, "Father, the vault stays ours." Then she smiled, small, knowing, unstoppable, before walking toward her car, leaving behind the ruins of a man who thought he'd married beneath him. The video went viral by sunrise. Trina hadn't leaked it herself, not directly. She'd simply sent an anonymous file to 3 carefully chosen journalists, one from a business magazine, one from a lifestyle blog, and one from a gossip column that thrived on scandal. By 6 a.m., Brooke White's betrayal was trending across every platform, #Rondo Heiress, #Diamond Betrayal, #billion-dollar revenge. The headlines wrote themselves: Jewelry Heiress exposes husband's affair, live at his own dinner party, Brooke White caught on tape planning to steal wife's fortune, the Aurora diamond reveal that shattered a marriage. Trina sat in her father's old study at Rondo Estates, sipping black coffee as her phone buzzed relentlessly. Texts, calls, interview requests. She ignored them all. Outside the window, the morning mist clung to the estate gardens like a veil. Everything felt surreal, quiet, yet charged with aftermath. Her phone lit up again. This time, it was Hardy. Hardy. "The press is at the gates. Should I let them in?" Trina. "No. Tell them I'll release a statement when I'm ready." She locked her phone and exhaled slowly. For the first time in weeks, she felt the weight lift. Not completely, but enough to breathe. The world knew now, and knowing meant she no longer had to carry the secret alone. By noon, the fallout had begun in earnest. Brooks' firm, White Capital Investments, released a terse statement. "We are conducting an internal review of Mr. Brooke White's conduct. Effective immediately, he has been placed on indefinite leave." Trina read it twice, her expression unreadable. Indefinite leave. Corporate speak for "we're cutting ties, but don't want to say it yet." Investors followed suit. Within hours, 3 major clients pulled their portfolios. Brooks' carefully constructed empire, built on charm, borrowed credibility, and Trina's silent support, crumbled like sandstone. She should have felt triumph. Instead, she felt hollow. Anne knocked softly on the study door. "Miss Trina, you asked to see the new designs." Trina looked up, grateful for the distraction. "Yes, come in." Anne entered, carrying a leather portfolio. She laid it on the desk, her weathered hands smoothing the cover gently. "These are the pieces Hardy and I have been working on for the new collection." Trina opened the portfolio. Inside were sketches of necklaces, bracelets, and rings, each one elegant, timeless, unmistakably Rondo. But there was something different about them. They weren't meant to dazzle. They were meant to empower. "We're calling it the Legacy Line," Anne said softly. "Every piece will be made by women artisans. Proceeds go toward training programs for young designers." Trina's throat tightened. Her father would have loved this. "It's perfect," she whispered. Anne smiled, her eyes crinkling with warmth. "Your father used to say, jewelry doesn't just adorn, it transforms. I think you're living that now." Trina nodded, unable to speak. Transformation. Yes, that's what this was. Not revenge, rebirth. Late that afternoon, Trina's phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it until a text appeared. Unknown. "Trina, it's Eva. Please, I need to talk to you." Trina stared at the message for a long time. Part of her wanted to delete it. Part of her wanted to watch Eva squirm. But another part, the part shaped by her father's quiet wisdom, wanted closure. She typed back, "Trina, 1 meeting, tomorrow, 3 p.m., Café Noir downtown. Come alone." The next day, Trina arrived early. She chose a table by the window where the afternoon light slanted through like liquid gold. She wore a simple black dress and no jewelry, except her mother's wedding band. Eva arrived exactly on time, her confidence visibly shaken. Gone was the scarlet dress and imitation pearls. Today she looked small. Gray sweater, no makeup, eyes rimmed red. She sat down cautiously. "Thank you for meeting me." Trina didn't respond. She simply watched, her gaze steady. Eva swallowed hard. "I know you probably hate me. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't know—" "You knew he was married," Trina interrupted, her voice calm but sharp. "You knew that much." Eva flinched. "I did, but he said you didn't love him, that you were cold, distant." Trina's lips curved, not in a smile but something colder. "And you believed him?" "I was stupid." "No," Trina said softly. "You were convenient." Eva's eyes filled with tears. "I lost everything too. My job, my reputation. People are calling me—" "A homewrecker?" Trina finished. "That's because you were." The words landed like stones. Eva looked down, her hands trembling in her lap. Trina leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "You thought you were playing chess with me, Eva, but you weren't even on the board. You were a pawn. And Brooke, he was using both of us." Eva's breath hitched. "I know." "Good," Trina said, standing. "Then you've learned something." She placed a $20 bill on the table for the coffee she hadn't touched. "I hope you rebuild your life, Eva. I really do. But I won't be part of it." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking softly against the tile. Behind her, Eva sat frozen, tears streaming silently down her face. Trina didn't look back. That evening, as Trina returned to Rondo Estates, her phone buzzed with a notification. A news alert. Breaking. Rondo heiress expands legacy trust to empower women in jewelry design. She opened the article. Her photo, taken at a charity gala years ago, appeared beside a quote she'd given to the press earlier that day. "My father taught me that diamonds are formed under pressure. I'm living proof of that truth. The Rondo Legacy Trust will train, mentor, and elevate women in the jewelry industry, because brilliance shouldn't be hidden. It should be shared." Trina smiled, small, real, unburdened. She walked into the vault room where her father's portrait watched over the collection. She stood before it, her reflection merging with his in the glass. "I did it, Papa," she whispered. "I turned the pain into something beautiful." And for the first time since his death, she felt him smile back. 3 months later, Trina stood before a crowd of 200 women, aspiring artisans, jewelry students, reporters, and donors, inside the newly renovated Rondo Legacy Trust headquarters. The building itself was a statement. Glass walls that let in natural light, workbenches made of reclaimed wood, display cases filled not with finished jewels, but with raw stones, unpolished, uncut, full of potential, just like the women she intended to uplift. Trina wore ivory silk and her mother's pearl earrings. No diamonds today, just quiet elegance and purpose. Behind her stood Munoz, Anne, and Hardy, the pillars of her father's empire, now the foundation of her own. Munoz, newly appointed chief operating officer, stood tall in his tailored suit, his silver hair gleaming. Anne, head of design, wore her signature apron over a floral dress, her hands still dusted faintly with gold powder. Hardy, creative director, smiled softly from the side, arms crossed, pride evident in his eyes. They had believed in her father. Now they believed in her. The applause settled, and Trina stepped to the podium. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't waver. "Good afternoon," she began. "My name is Trina Rondo, and for most of my life, I believed that silence kept me safe." The room stilled. "I was taught to be humble, to hide my wealth, my name, my legacy, because showing it made you a target. And for years, I thought that was wisdom." She paused, her gaze sweeping the audience. "But silence also hid my power." Murmurs rippled through the crowds, and cameras clicked softly. "My father, Ambassador Chris Rondo, once told me that diamonds are formed under pressure. I didn't fully understand what he meant, until I was tested, until I was betrayed, until I had to decide whether to break or become unbreakable." Her voice grew stronger. "I chose the latter." Applause erupted, but Trina raised a hand gently, signaling she wasn't finished. "This foundation isn't about revenge. It's not about proving anyone wrong. It's about creating space for women who have been told to stay small, stay quiet, stay hidden. It's about teaching you that your brilliance doesn't need permission. It needs investment." She gestured toward the workbenches behind her, where raw gemstones glittered under soft light. "Every woman here will receive training in jewelry design, gemology, metalwork, and business. You'll learn from the best artisans in the world, and when you graduate, you won't just leave with a certificate. You'll leave with a collection under your own name and the resources to launch your own brand." The room exploded in applause. Some women wiped tears. Others stood, clapping until their palms burned. Trina felt something crack open inside her chest, not pain, but release. Healing didn't come from destroying Brooke. It came from building something he could never take from her. "My father taught me that legacy isn't what you inherit," she continued, her voice soft now, intimate. "It's what you create. Today, we begin creating ours, together." The applause thundered. Reporters scribbled frantically. Anne dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. Munoz nodded approvingly. Hardy grinned like a proud older brother. Trina stepped back from the podium, her heart full for the first time in months. That evening, Back at Rondo Estates, Trina sorted through mail in her father's study. Most of it was congratulatory, letters from donors, thank you notes from scholarship recipients, interview requests. Then she saw it. A plain white envelope, no return address, no stamp, hand-delivered. Her pulse quickened. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single handwritten note on cream stationery. The handwriting was unmistakable. Brooks. Trina, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know I was wrong. About everything. You were never the problem. I was. You were always enough. I just wasn't. I'm sorry. It wasn't signed. Trina stared at the letter for a long time, her expression unreadable. Part of her felt vindicated. Part of her felt nothing at all. She folded the letter carefully, walked to the fireplace, and tossed it into the flames. The paper curled, blackened, and disappeared into ash. She didn't need his apology. She'd already forgiven herself for believing him. That was enough. Trina returned to her desk, opened her laptop, and began drafting the next phase of the Legacy Trust. International scholarships, partnership programs, a documentary series showcasing women artisans. The future glittered ahead of her, not because of what she'd survived, but because of what she was building. And this time, no one could take it from her. 6 months had passed since the night everything changed. Spring had returned to Rondo Estates, filling the gardens with jasmine and wild roses, the kind of beauty that bloomed quietly, without demanding attention, the kind Trina had finally learned to embody. She sat before her mother's vanity mirror, the same one she'd watched her mother use as a child. The wood was aged now, the gold trim slightly faded, but it still held elegance the way old things do, through memory and meaning. Trina lifted her mother's diamond necklace from its velvet case. The stones caught the evening light, scattering fragments of brilliance across the walls like captured stars. She fastened it around her neck slowly, deliberately, feeling the cool weight settle against her collarbone. In the mirror, her reflection stared back, poised, radiant, unbroken. She wasn't the same woman who'd sat at that velvet-covered table months ago, trembling with betrayal. She wasn't even the woman who'd walked away from Brooks' dinner party in silent victory. She was something new, something forged. Her gaze drifted to the photographs arranged on the vanity's surface. Her father, standing beside the vault with that knowing smile. Anne and Hardy, laughing during last month's Legacy Trust graduation ceremony. Munoz, presenting the first scholarship recipient with her custom-designed ring. And there, tucked in the corner, a candid shot of Trina herself, taken just last week at the foundation's ribbon cutting. She was mid-laugh, surrounded by young women holding gemstones they'd cut with their own hands. She looked alive. Trina traced her fingertips along the edge of her mother's necklace and whispered to her reflection, "He thought I was ordinary." A faint smile curved her lips. "My father raised me to shine in silence until it was time." And it had been time. Not for revenge, not for bitterness, but for revelation, for reclamation, for rising. She stood slowly, smoothing her dress, a deep emerald green that her father once said made her look like royalty. She walked to the window, where the sun was setting over the estate, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose gold. Behind her, the jewelry boxes glimmered softly in the fading light, no longer symbols of what she'd hidden, but reminders of what she'd protected, what she'd become. Trina turned back toward the mirror one last time, her expression serene but powerful. She looked directly at her own reflection, as though speaking to someone beyond it, someone who needed to hear what she'd learned. "Never hide your worth to make someone comfortable," she said softly, her voice steady and sure. "Especially not a man who mistakes your kindness for weakness." The words hung in the air like a benediction, like truth carved in diamond. She exhaled slowly, feeling the last remnants of heartbreak dissolve into something lighter. Not forgetting, but transcending. The Rondo Legacy Trust was thriving. The foundation had trained over 50 women in its first cohort. Brooke's name had faded into obscurity, a cautionary tale whispered in circles that no longer mattered to her. And Trina? Trina had rebuilt herself, not from the ashes of her marriage, but from the foundation her father had always believed she possessed. She was no longer waiting to be seen. She was unmissable. As the last light of day melted into twilight, Trina returned to her father's study. She lit a single candle beside his portrait and whispered, "Thank you, Papa, for teaching me that diamonds don't break under pressure. They're born from it." The flame flickered softly, casting gentle shadows across his face. And in that quiet moment, Trina Rondo, heiress, survivor, builder of legacies, smiled. Not because she'd won, but because she was finally, fully free. Did you connect with Trina's story? I'd love to know. Which city are you listening from? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your words fuel these stories, and I read every single one. If this story moved you, touched you, or made you feel seen, consider sending a super thanks to help me keep creating powerful, emotional narratives like this one. Your support means the world and allows me to bring more hidden legacies, untold betrayals, and triumphant comebacks to life. I'm waiting to hear from you. What would you have done in Trina's place? Let's talk about it in the comments. On your screen right now, you'll see 2 more incredible life stories I think you'll love. There's so much more waiting for you on my channel, stories of strength, redemption, and women who refuse to stay silent. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a story that could change how you see yourself.